All right. Good afternoon. I forgot to change the name. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's month of service presentation of foreclosures. We're here today to talk about property tax and collections and prevention process as it relates to foreclosures. My name is Nia Murray. I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the month of service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods. And joining us on behalf of our presenting partners today with Lone Star Legal Aid, we have Ms. Samantha Guzman, and along with Ms. Lauren Masulo, who's going to be giving the legal information regarding property tax foreclosures and prevention. Also included in the partnership, we have the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. And joining us today, we have Ms. Shay Pinkowski here to kind of answer some questions and give you a little brief overview about the property tax bill, and also be monitoring the chat in case you guys have questions about your property tax bill or delinquency questions and payment options and things of that nature. But we're going to get into a whole lot of detail about that in just a little bit as well. But in addition to these partners, we also have the Earl Carl Institute, Lone Star Legal Aid. Yeah, we already said Lone Star Legal Aid, Texas Legal Services Center, the Harris Central Appraisal District, and the Houston Volunteer Lawyers. And together we make up a month of service. And basically, a month of service is the collaboration of all of our organizations coming together on a monthly basis, offering a variety of different workshops, resources, and information to the community relative to asset building, asset protection, the maintaining of generational wealth, and community empowerment. We know that there are a lot of underserved communities that are out there that don't have access to a lot of information, that don't know, people that don't know where to go for available resources. So we collaborated several years ago in an effort to try to make a larger impact and to try and get as much information as we can out there to the community. So we used to go out into the various communities around the city, hosting a month-long set of workshops, going to another community and doing the same thing, which is how we kind of came up with a month of service. So over the years, that has evolved. We've moved to the virtual platform, but it also has allowed us the opportunity to reach even more people around the city, throughout several surrounding counties and across the state of Texas even. So do know that regardless of where you're tuning in from, that the information that does get presented here today is relative to the entire state of Texas, not just for the city of Houston or for Harris County, that the information is, pretty much the same. So, so do keep that in mind. This is your opportunity to ask questions. If you have any particular questions in regards to your own personal situation that you have, we do ask that you either follow up with questions or put the question in the chat, and apply or reach out to our legal service partners like Lone Star Legal Aid, or directly to the tax office if you have questions about your delinquent bills, so that you can get those personal and detailed information kind of addressed. This is a public forum, so we want to try to protect your privacy as much as we possibly can. So we don't want your detailed, specific information kind of getting out there to the public to have, have that information out there. If you are joining us on Zoom, you have the opportunity to type your question into the comment section or in the chat box, or unmute yourself, and you can ask your questions directly of the presenters at the end of the presentation. Again, we are recording this session, and we do broadcast live on our social media platform and broadcast live on YouTube, so that if you are joining us on the YouTube channels or any of the other platforms, you do have the opportunity to type your question into the comment section there. I'll be monitoring that and make sure that those questions gets addressed at the end of the presentation as well. So, so do know that information, again, that is presented here is for educational purpose. It is not to be considered legal advice. And you will hear that repeated again, because we want to make sure that people do know that, again, we are on a public platform, and this is not to be considered any type of legal advice. But we do encourage you to reach out if you do find yourselves in need of a situation and you need some civic or some civil legal assistance. So I noticed on Tuesday when we did our evictions presentation that that there are a lot of folks that really just don't understand a lot of the processes, that don't they don't really know what some things mean. So sometimes they have it in their head when they hear eviction or repossession or foreclosure, they think they have no options, that that's just it. It's just the end. And that's just not the case. So we want to make sure also that people really have a good understanding of what foreclosure actually means, what the process is, and then what your rights are, and what your available options are. So that that it's not it doesn't have to be a permanent thing, and it's not something that you should just ignore, that you should try to get ahead of it as quickly as you possibly can, so that way you can avoid or potentially avoid a foreclosure process or a foreclosure proceeding, if you at all possibly can. So with that being said, we are going to cover a lot of information here today as it relates to your property taxes, the exemptions, how to apply for them, how they save you money, how do you save money on your tax bill, what happens when you become delinquent, what that process is for foreclosure, what your legal rights are. It's a lot of information. So just so that you know, we're going to touch on a little bit of everything. And then also where you go for available resources like Lone Star Legal Aid for them to be able to assist you with your foreclosure process. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into our introductions, and then we're going to move right on into the presentation. So Shay, why don't we start with you, since Lauren and Sam are going to go first, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Shay Pinkowski, and I'm here on behalf of the Office of Annette Ramirez with the Harris County Tax Assessor's Collector's Office. I'll be here to answer questions about your tax bill, how it's calculated, and how that plays into the part of making sure that you're paying your taxes and know your dates. But if you have any questions for me, feel free to put it into the chat. As Ms. Mia said, please make sure that you don't put any personal information on there. I'll put my contact information in the chat as well, should anyone have a specific question that they would like to reach out to us about. But I'm here to answer questions, and I'm here to hopefully be able to assist some of y'all in any kind of troubles that y'all might be having with your property taxes. But I really look forward to helping you guys out and being able to take part in the conversation. So I'll feel free to go ahead and send it over to Miss Lauren, I believe, or Miss Sam.
Yep, both.
Hi. Well, we'll go in reverse order here then. My name is Lauren Masula Martin. I'm a staff attorney with Lone Star Legal Aid, and I'll be talking towards the end of the presentation about litigation, what happens when you're facing a tax foreclosure lawsuit, and what are your rights leading up to, during, and after. And then I'll pass it to Sam, where she'll be covering our first portion.
So my name is Samantha Guzman. I am a paralegal in our foreclosure prevention unit here at Lone Star Legal Aid. Super excited to be here and provide some education on property tax collections and foreclosure prevention. So bear with me. This is my first time being a major host of this. I'm usually just in the background. So.
It's quite all right. You'll be fine.
So I guess with that being said, we can get started.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me share my screen.
Okay, just a reminder again, if you guys do have questions, please feel free to type your question into the chat or into the comment section. So, all right, Sam, you're good. You're good to go.
Again, we're talking about property tax collections and foreclosure prevention. Oh, no. Okay, as a reminder, today's presentation provides legal information only, it's not legal advice. We're not advising you regarding your personal property tax or home ownership situation. And if you need information or advice, please contact your financial tax advisor and a lawyer regarding your personal situation. Our agenda for today is I'm going to give a brief rundown of Lone Star Legal Aid and the services that we provide. And then we'll talk about property tax basics and an introduction into that. And then we'll move on to preventing property tax foreclosures. And we'll talk about strategies to make taxes more affordable, protesting your property value. We'll do a little brief information about homestead exemptions and protesting denials, payment plans and tax deferrals, and then we'll move on to property tax lawsuits and foreclosures, as well as homeowner rights after a tax foreclosure. So here at Lone Star Legal Aid, we protect and advance the civil legal rights of the millions of Texans living in poverty. Just just some fast facts about Lone Star Legal Aid. We serve about 60,000 square miles across 72 Texas counties and 4 in Southwest Arkansas. Our staff operates from our Houston office as well as 13 other offices and cities, including Beaumont, Galveston, and Waco, and nearly 2 million people in the service area who qualify for our assistance based on the federal poverty guidelines. In 2024, Lone Star Legal Aid handled over 25,000 cases, assisting over 61,000 people, many of whom were survivors of domestic violence, seniors, and veterans. So let's talk about people we serve at Lone Star Legal Aid. Here we help some of the most vulnerable members of our community, including children, veterans, seniors, people with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQIA+ community, as well as individuals who are experiencing homelessness. The majority of our clients are women, and many of them are mothers trying to care for their families. A lot of people we serve here at Lone Star Legal Aid live in rural or remote areas, and they may face isolation because of limited literacy or language barriers, and some don't have access to the internet or even phones. In fact, more than 1.5 million people in our service area speak a language other than English, and here at Lone Star Legal Aid, we do have access to language lines. So if you don't speak English, don't let that deter you from seeking assistance from Lone Star Legal Aid. The need for legal help is far greater than the number of attorneys available. In Texas, there's one attorney for every 380 people in the general population. However, in our legal aid service industry, there is only one legal aid attorney for every 17,000 eligible low-income residents. And finally, many of our clients don't have access to basic communication tools as I had mentioned, such as phones or the internet. And public transportation is rare in most of the rural areas we cover, making it even harder for people to get home. And then again, our mission at Lone Star Legal Aid is to protect and advance the civil legal rights of millions of Texans living in poverty by providing free advocacy, legal representation, and community education, ensuring equal access to justice. So to be eligible for our services here at Lone Star Legal Aid, you have to live in one of the 76 counties we serve. If you don't live in one of our 76 counties, there are 2 other legal aid programs in the rest of Texas that do service the areas we don't service. We only work on civil cases. We do not handle criminal cases. We also do not handle personal injury cases. And we only help those who are low income. Some substantive law types that we work consumer, employment, family law, healthcare, housing, neighborhood problems, and public education, financial assistance, and public benefits. So think SNAP, think Medicaid, Social Security, things like that. And then we do have some special projects, which I'm not going to get into, but if you want to take a brief look at the list here, you can. And then, so how do you ask for help from Lone Star Legal Aid? Well, you can apply online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by visiting www.lonestarlegal.org. And if you do not have access to the internet, you can give us a call at 1-800-733-8394 and Monday through Friday during regular business hours to submit an application that way as well. We're going to talk about some branch offices. I'll give you the cities that we're located in, and then we'll move along after that. So we have offices in Beaumont, Belton, Bryan, Clute, Texas, Conroe, Galveston, Houston, Longview, Nacogdoches, Paris, Tyler, Texarkana, Richmond, and Waco. You can follow us on social media. All of our handles are at Lone Star Legal Aid, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Oh, the agenda again. So let's jump right into it. So right now I'm going to discuss understanding property taxes in Texas. So what are property taxes? Well, property taxes are local taxes, which mean local officials are responsible for appraising or valuing your property, setting the tax rates, and collecting taxes. Property taxes are the largest source of local government funding in Texas, and these funds are essential for maintaining and improving community service, including public schools, city and streets, and county roads, and then our emergency services such as fire and police departments. They also service libraries, parks, and other public services. And in short, property taxes are how local communities fund vital infrastructure and services that benefit all of us living in those counties. Texas law also outlines how property taxes are assessed and collected. And in each county, local taxing units, think school districts, cities, and counties, set the tax rates and levy property taxes based on appraised value of your property. So your property's value is determined by the Central Appraisal District, which we'll call the CAD, in your county, and in Houston, it's called Harris Central Appraisal District, and we refer to it as HCAD in short. This appraisal process ensures that each property owner pays their fair share of property taxes. So some constitutional standards for property taxes. You have your fair taxation standard, which means that the property taxes must be equal and fair for everybody. So we're not different, we're all the same. And then property tax, tangible property tax is based on what it should sell for on January 1st of each year. And then a little later, we'll get into how that whole thing, the timeline works. So, but some land, like certain farms, can be taxed differently. In all property is taxable unless the law says it's exempt. And exemptions can exclude all or part of your property's value. Your CAD must notify you if your property value goes up every year. And each property should have only one appraised value set by the appraisal district. So there's not multiple, it's just one appraised value. And these districts usually follow your county lines. So it's basically what county your property is located in. So how does the system work? Well, there are three main authorities for the property tax system in each Texas county. You have the appraisal district, the appraisal review boards, which we'll refer to as ARB, and then we have our local taxing units, and we'll start to discuss what each authority is and what they do. So for your appraisal district, your county has your appraisal district, which decides, again, your property value. Within the CAD, you have a chief appraiser who is also the chief administrator and reports to a board of directors for its operation. Then you have your appraisal review board, also ARB, and they hear your protest if you think your value is too high, and it also settles any disagreements between you and the appraisal district. Then you have your local taxing units. I think I mentioned it before. Think school districts within your cities, your municipal utility districts such as MUDs. They set their budget for the year, which in turn sets your tax rate that all property owners will pay. And then they also have tax offices that collect the taxes. So I know we have the Harris Central Appraisal District, the ones that are in charge of setting the tax rates, but then you have the tax office, which is in charge of collecting your payments for your taxes every year. Two separate entities. So where do your property taxes go? I want to know. I'm a homeowner. So we start off with you pay your taxes to the tax collector, and then the tax collector takes your money and distributes it to the schools, cities, and other local governments. And then they choose how they spend the money. Some go on schools, they cover roads, hospitals, emergency services, as well as other programs. There are 4 stages of the taxation process, and we'll go through those in depth in the next slides. But we'll discuss valuing the taxable property, protesting the property values, adopting the tax rates, and then we'll discuss collecting taxes. So There is an annual property tax timeline, and the tax year starts January 1st. January 1st is a key date in the property tax timeline because this is when the appraisal district looks at your property to decide its value for the year. They consider what the property is being used for on that date, whether it's a home, rental, or business, and what the market conditions look like at that time. To figure out property values, the appraisal districts use a process called mass appraisal. And what that means is that they group smaller properties together and use data models to estimate their values instead of doing individual appraisals for each home. So you may think that they come out and they look at your home individually and your neighbor's home and whatnot, but no, what they do is just mass appraisals and group them together. So keep that in mind when we get a little further into protests and whatnot. So even if you make changes to your property later in the year, it's what was true on January 1st that usually matters most for your taxes. Just like a brief scenario, my home was rebuilt, but the year that it was rebuilt, January 1st, it was rebuilt afterwards. So my property taxes for that year were substantially lower than what they should have been whenever we moved back in and it was a brand new home. So whatever changes you make after January 1st don't affect your taxes until the next year. Then you have January 1st through April 30th, and that's when the appraisal districts review your applications for things like tax exemptions, special agriculture appraisals, and other types of tax relief. If you qualify for a homestead, over 65, disabled, or another exemption, that would be the time to apply. So between January 1st and April 30th. However, if you miss that April 30th deadline to file for your exemptions, don't panic because many appraisal districts will accept late exemption applications. So still submit your applications. And I do want to, point out that some CADs will also accept applications for homestead exemptions for 2 years prior. So if you're submitting your application for 2025 and you haven't done it for 2024 or 23, you can submit it for those years as well. This is also the time of the year when the appraisal district sends out your notice of appraised value in the mail. This notice tells you what they think your property is worth. I know I got mine in mid-April and it was, I believe, a green letter. But it just showed our appraised value of our home and whatnot. But if you think your value is too high, again, because they do a mass appraisal and not an individual appraisal of your home, this is your opportunity to get ready to file a protest. Everybody's entitled to file a protest. It doesn't cost you anything. We recommend that you do it, but it's ultimately up to you. So between January 1st, and remember that's our key date, and May 15th, you have a right to protest. So you have a right to challenge the value of the appraisal district puts on your home, your property. This is called filing a protest. Starting around May 15th, a group called the Appraisal Review Board, again, ARB, starts holding protest hearings. Your deadline to submit your protest is May 15th, although if you received it not in a timely manner, then you do have a little bit of an extended time to file your protest. So who is the ARB? So the ARB is made up of regular people like you and I from the community. They listen to both sides of the protests between you and the appraisal district, and then they decide if your property value should change. When all the protests are done, the chief appraiser sends a final list of property values called the appraisal roll to the local tax offices. That list is used to figure out your bill. So between May 15th through October, our local officials, like city councils and school boards, decide how much to charge in property taxes. These rates help pay for services and any debts they owe. Your property usually gets taxed by more than one group. For example, both the county and the school districts. I know some people may see the community colleges in their areas, in their neighborhoods, as well as the MUDs. here we go. And then some properties may also tax to special districts like MUD, or rural fire districts, or even a community college district. Between October and December and into the next year, tax bills usually come out in October or November. And as soon as you get your bill, you can start paying. You do have until January 31st to pay your property taxes without any extra charges. Starting February 1st, if you haven't paid your tax bill, penalties and interest start adding up on what you owe. And I know sometimes you get your tax statements and it'll say pay by this date. And it's your flat tax rate. And if you don't pay by January 31st, then they'll start accruing interest and penalties. And then it'll have a list. If you pay by February, it's this amount. And then you'll see it slowly increase the longer you don't pay your tax bill. And by July 1st, if taxes are still unpaid, taxing units can add legal fees for trying to collect those overdue payments. And we'll talk more too about what you can do if you can't pay your taxes. You don't ever not want to pay your taxes, but there are tools to help you navigate that process as well. So let's walk through the property tax timeline, because I know I tend to speak real fast. And so you'll know what to expect during the year. So again, January 1st is the official start date of the property tax year. On this date, again, your local appraisal district sets your property value. Also, a tax lien is automatically attached to your property to make sure taxes eventually get paid. Then we'll go along to January 1st to April 30th, and this is when you can apply for exemptions. And at the same time, appraisal districts are finalizing your property values. Then we'll move along to April to May. And that's when your appraisal district sends out notices of your property's value, and when you have the option to protest your value as well. Then May through July, if you decide to protest your value, this is when you should act. This is when you go before the ARB, who will review your case and decide whether to lower your value. And then later on, I'll talk about what you can do if they deny your request for your protest. And we'll get into that. Then August through September, local governments, again, like your school district or city, set the tax rates that determine how much you'll owe again. Then October 1st was when the tax bills are sent out to property owners. And this is when you find out what your final amount is owed and when it's due. Well, we know when it's due. And then January 31st of the next year is the deadline to pay your property taxes. And if you don't pay by that date, then your penalties and interest will start. And then again in July, if taxes aren't paid, the local taxing units can add the extra fees for legal costs towards collections. So how is my property tax amount calculated? So they are based on two things: how much your home is worth and the tax rate set by the local government. And if you qualify for exemptions like the homestead or a senior exemption, those lower your home's taxable value, which means you pay less taxes. So let's look at an example from the Harris Central's Appraisal District's website. And let's work it out. So in this example, the appraised value of this home is $323,385. But the homeowner has an exemption of $164,677 from the school district. So that exemption lowers the taxable value to $158,000. Sorry, numbers are my game. That's why I work in the legal field. $708. The 2023 tax rate for HISD was 0.8683%. And to find the taxes that are due, you would multiply the taxable value by the tax rate. So we'll take the taxable value of $158,708 by your tax rate, which will give you $1,378.06. And that's what you owe in taxes for Houston ISD only. So, oh, that's just part of the bill. That doesn't include any of the other jurisdictions that may be taxing you as well. As you can see here on our example, we do also have Harris County. And I know in my property tax bill, I do have the Houston HCC taxes that we have to pay as well. So again, this is just one part of the bill. The same home may also be taxed again by Harris County, the city or utility district, but it's mostly dependent on where the property is located. Again, this is how we calculate taxes. Their appraised value minus the exemption value is a taxable amount. And then you take the taxable value times the tax rate and you'll get your tax amount. So again, without the exemption without the homestead exemption, their taxes would have been $2,807.95. So look at the difference between those, and that's with a homestead exemption, which if it's your principal residence, you're entitled to that exemption. So some tax updates that we have are the homestead exemption for school taxes went up from 40,000 to 100,000. That means more of your home's value is protected from school district taxes. Secondly, if you're a new homeowner, you can now get a prorated exemption right away. You don't have to wait until the next year. Just be sure to apply within 1 year of buying your home. And lastly, non-homesteaded properties like rental or commercial properties have a new 3-year cap. Their appraised value can go up more than 20% each year if they're valued under $5 million. Homestead properties already have a cap of no more than a 10% increase each year on their appraised value. So how can I lower my property taxes? We're just going to skim through some of this, but we'll try to make it work. So protesting the appraised value of your home. If the appraisal district raises your value of your property compared to last year, they have to send you a notice. For most people, this notice has to be sent by May 1st, but if your property is your homestead, they're supposed to send it to you by April 1st, or as soon as they can after that. The notice that they send you will tell you what your appraised value is, and then it will also explain how to file a protest if you disagree with it. And importantly, the notice will also let you know that you have an informal meeting with the appraisal district to try and resolve these things before going to a formal hearing with the ARB. So if you think your value is too high, if the appraisal is too high, you can file a notice of protest. Again, I stated earlier, you have until May 15th. But if they didn't send their notice timely, you have 30 days from the date the appraisal district delivered your notice, but whichever date is later. You can file your protest on paper or you can file it online. I know in Harris County, you can do it online for sure. So you can represent yourself in a protest hearing, or you can appoint someone to represent you. If you appoint someone to represent you, you will need to sign an appointment of agent form or an authorization for a notice of protest form. Again, you can represent yourself. And I know I've been hearing on the radio these companies that will help you with your protest process, and they will charge you a small fee if they do reduce your appraisal value. But a lot of them say that they won't if they don't. But, if you don't want to handle it yourself, they're out there. If the appraisal district increases your property value compared to last year, again, they're required to send you the notice. I feel like we discussed that already. So I'll skip that a little bit. It will also tell you that you have the option to request. Yeah, we'll skip that. Sorry. So what should I expect at my ARB protest hearing? If you and the appraisal district can reach an agreement when you talk informally, then the next step is to have a formal hearing in front of the ARB. And at that hearing, a panel of ARB members, who again are local citizens like you and I, will listen to your side, then they'll listen to the chief appraiser side. And then you can talk about why you think your property value is wrong, or raise concerns about exemptions or special appraisals. Remember that the ARB's decision only applies to the current tax year, so every year you will have to protest. If your property value goes up, you'll have to protest it. It doesn't carry over. Keep that in mind as well. And again, ooh, did I skip? You won't be penalized if you're at a hearing. They won't raise your appraised value at all. So it's free. You could potentially lower your tax bill by lowering your appraisal value. It won't go up during that hearing. So what should I expect at an ARB protest hearing? So you should bring information about your property, bring some solid evidence and enough copies for everyone involved. So you, the appraisal district, and then the I think it's 3 people, ARB panel. So about 5 copies. If your hearing is remote via Zoom, be sure to upload your documents online in advance so everyone can see them. You want to make sure you bring anything that helps show the true value of your home. So that can include pictures of your property, inside or out, especially anything that you think can damage, anything that you think can lower the value. And the first part there are 2 parts of the protest. So the first part is when you show your evidence, photos, paperwork, receipts from repairs or things like that. Then you explain what it means and how it supports your case. Make sure to be clear, to the point, and be respectful. Photos of your property. Okay. Receipts or estimates for repairs like roofing or foundation work, proof of recent sales, like similar homes in your neighborhoods that have sold, like listings, appraisals, or closing papers. And just remember, the more specific and recent your evidence is, the more helpful it will be to your case. For in-person hearings, you'll have to go to the appraisal district office. When you get there, make sure you sign in when you arrive and check in and be ready to wait, because remember, you're not the only one protesting your properties, and they have all these hearings within a set time frame. So you may be there waiting while somebody else is presenting their case for their protest. And if you can't make it to an in-person meeting, make sure you let the appraisal district office know and ask for a remote hearing. So the process is, after you sign in, when it's your meeting time, you'll go into a room with a panel of 3 ARB members and someone from the appraisal district, which is usually the chief appraiser or a representative. If you prefer, and you're not used to a big audience, you can request in advance to have your case heard by just 1 ARB member instead of a panel. If your hearing is remote, then they'll email you a link to join by video, just like in a Zoom or a Teams call. Make sure you sign up, make sure you log in maybe 2 minutes before your hearing, even if you have to wait in an online waiting room. You want to be on time and not late. So both the appraisal district and the homeowner usually get about 15 minutes each to present your case or their case at the hearing. So it's important to be organized and use your time wisely. Stick to the facts and your evidence. The ARB can consider general market conditions, such as property values in your area are dropping, or if there's been flood damage or construction nearby. They can't just adjust your value because you had a tough year financially, so keep that in mind. And they're also not allowed to consider personal income, job loss, or other financial struggles. And then, so what happens if you disagree with the results of your protest? Let's say they said, no, we're not going to lower them. Well, you can file a lawsuit in the state district court in the county where the property is located, or you can appeal and ask for a binding arbitration. This is when you should consider contacting a lawyer if you get to this stage. Oh, did I skip? Okay. So what happens if I miss my protest deadline? If you missed the deadline, which was 2 weeks ago, yeah. last week. To protest your property value, there's still a chance you can do it late, but only under certain conditions. You must have paid the part of your taxes that wasn't under protest and have a valid reason for missing the deadline. Some of those reasons could include that, well, if you didn't get your value notice, that could count as a good cause. So let's say they sent out all the notices, you never got it, and it's already today. And you're like, oh yeah, you're listening to this presentation. You're like, I never got a protest. Let me go look it up. That may be a good reason. You'll still have a separate hearing first, just to show that you had good cause and that your taxes were paid. If the ARB agrees, then you may get a second hearing where you can present your protest about the value. Now, if you missed the deadline to protest an exemption denial, like a homestead exemption, you can still reapply for the exemption itself, so don't give up. And remember, I said that your homestead exemptions can go back 2 years. So there's still time. And if you qualify for our services, we may be able to help you file that exemption itself. So, okay, this is where I'm gonna kind of breeze through it as I've been instructed to do. So, what are homestead exemptions and how do they affect your taxes? So the amount you pay in property taxes depends on your home's appraised value again, and the higher the value, the more property taxes you owe. With a homestead exemption, this helps lower your taxable value of your home, as we saw in the example. So basically, it's like getting a discount, and part of your home's value isn't taxed, so your tax bill goes down. And this is a great tool to help you financially, especially those who are on fixed incomes. If you have your homestead exemption, your home's value can go up by more than 10% each year for tax purposes, even if the market value rises faster. And if you qualify for an over 65 or a disabled exemption, your school district taxes get frozen the year you qualify. That means they won't go up in the future years, even if the property value does. I'm just gonna say something. You can apply for homestead exemptions for the property you use as your primary residence if you have an ownership interest in it. You can only have one homestead exemption as well. So in order to be approved for a homestead exemption, that has to be your principal residence. It must be where you live. It can't be your rental property. And you have to show proof that you live there. And you only get one of those. So even if I have multiple properties, I'm only living in one. So I only qualify for one homestead exemption. It doesn't have to be a traditional house. It could be a condo. It could be a manufactured home. Even if the land is leased, your home is not. As long as you're living in that property, you may qualify for your homestead exemption. A homestead can also include up to 20 acres of land, as long as the homeowner owns the land and it's being used for residential purposes, like a yard, garden, or a driveway. And then, remember this, even if you don't remember anything else. Exemptions are not automatic. You do have to apply for them. If you don't apply, you won't get savings. And I know that we just had an update about homestead exemptions having to be renewed every 5 years. So if you apply this year, check back in 5 years and make sure that you reapply for your homestead exemption and it doesn't drop off. So it's always free to apply for a homestead exemption. It's also free to file a tax deferral affidavit. You may get letters in the mail for paid services from people or companies who claim that they can help you apply for these homestead exemptions for a fee, but it's free to apply. So don't get scammed. And if you're not sure, call us here at Lone Star Legal Aid, and we may be able to give you some advice about this, help fill out some forms, or maybe even submit them to your CAD. Where do you find your applications? You can find this is for Harris Central Appraisal District. You can visit their website at www.hcad.org. You'll have to go to the forms tab at the top, and then it will bring you a list of all the forms that you can find about homestead exemptions. If you're, and this is what your general homestead exemption looks like for Harris County. And then if you're not in Harris County, you can also go to the Texas Comptroller site at comptroller.texas.gov, and you can find your exemption forms, your affidavits, your deferral forms there as well. And this is what a general homestead exemption application looks like. It is called Form 50-114. You will have to fill all of this information out. Again, if you need assistance with that, you can call Lone Star Legal Aid. And then this is our general information on how to fill out this form as well. If you can't call us or don't qualify, it takes you step by step on how to fill out the form. Homestead exemptions, again, you have the general homestead exemption, you have your elder or disabled exemption, as well as an heir property owner eligibility. There are also some exemptions for disabled veterans, agriculture, and whatnot. In some taxing units may offer more generous exemption amounts when allowed by law. So how do I qualify for an exemption? Again, you have to own that property and live there as your principal residence. You must provide a traditional deed or recorded contract for deed, also known as for sale by owner or lease to own. Or you can be an heir to the deceased owner. So let's say my grandparents passed away and I go and I live in their home. I'm an heir to a deceased owner. Again, only one homestead is allowed. No rental properties qualify. And again, it must be your main residence. You must be an individual. So businesses or corporations do not qualify. No LLCs. It has to be an actual human being. And you must also produce a valid current Texas driver's license or ID with the property address listed to match your residence, the address on your homestead exemption application. You can also qualify for an older or disabled exemption, which is now effective as of January 1st of the tax year that you qualify. So if I'm turning 65 this year, I can apply for that 65 or older exemption. And then a residence homestead can also be a separate structure like a condominium or a manufactured home located on owned or leased lands, as long as you're living in the home. Living in the home owns it. As long as the person living in the home owns it. Sorry. The homestead, residence homestead can again include 20 acres if it is owned by the homeowner and used for your residence. Even if you don't fully own the property by yourself, you may still qualify for a homestead exemption depending on your situation. So what does that mean? If you're married and the property qualifies, each spouse is treated as if they own 100%. So both get the full benefit under community property rules. If you inherit the home, you may qualify as an heir property owner, but we'll talk about that in a little bit because it's some good information. And if you only own part of the property and you're not married or didn't inherit it, you may still get part of the exemption. And that's called a portion interest. So you'll only get a percentage based on the portion that you own. What else? Give me a second. Come on. So what is the deadline to apply for a residence homestead exemption? To get an exemption for the current tax year, you need to turn in your full application again by April 30th. But again, remember I said if you don't file it in time, they can go back and apply your exemption to that tax year. If you're applying for a residence homestead exemption over 65 or disabled, again, you have 2 years to file late. If your exemption is approved late, so let's say you apply today or this year, 2024 and 2023, and it's approved, your past taxes will be recalculated for the years you should have gotten that is exemption. And in some cases, we have seen clients that have gotten refunds because after the exemption is applied it turns out they overpaid. So that's always a good thing. But remember, if you owe back taxes, your balance can be reduced, but you'll still owe taxes. So it doesn't make those taxes go away. So disability exemption and over 65. If you're over 65 and or you have a disability, you can only get one. You can't get both. So you have to pick. But both exemptions come with school tax freeze, which means they can't go up. The school taxes can't go up. So once you qualify, your school district taxes won't go up again unless you make major improvements to the property, like building an extra room onto your home. Then your taxes can go up. But other than that, the school taxes will freeze. Homeowners who qualify for the over 65 or disabled exemption get an extra $10,000 exemption for school taxes on top of the regular $100,000 school tax exemptions that everybody else gets. And then again, some local taxing units may offer even bigger exemptions for seniors or people with disabilities if the law allows, but you have to check individually with your local tax office. And then I had this question come up recently with one of my clients, that if your spouse has an over 65 or disabled exemption and they pass away and you're 55 or older, you may be able to keep the exemption and continue receiving that benefit. I had a client ask me that because he's older than his wife and he wanted to make sure that she would continue to maintain that exemption if something were to happen to him, and it was good information to pass along. Disaster tax exemptions. We know we're coming into hurricane season, and most of us live here in Houston, Harris County, and disasters are inevitable. So if your property is in a governor declared disaster area and was damaged by at least 15%, you may qualify for a temporary property tax exemption. That exemption reduces the appraised value of the damaged property, which can in turn lower your tax bill while you rebuild and recover. It applies to homes, buildings, and certain manufactured homes, and then even some businesses if it's used to earn income. You must file your application within 105 days of the governor's disaster declaration. So this is not the same as your regular homestead exemptions. This is something different. So once the governor declares it's a disaster area, the clock starts and you will have 105 days to file your disaster exemption. And to do that, you have to fill out Form 5312 and submit your supporting documents like photos, inspection reports, repair estimates, and invoices of what you have paid to have your home repaired. And this is what your disaster tax exemption form looks like. And so this is an example of what you can provide to the tax office whenever you're at your ARB hearing, pictures of your neighborhood and whatnot. Oh, is this a video? Oh, it is.
Yes, that's our air property video,
Yeah.
if you were
Should we
showing it.
skip it? Yeah. Should we go through it or what do you think?
Yeah, go ahead and show it.
Can you hear?
No, you have to share your audio too. So pause it. Go to, you see where you got your share screen, your green button on the top?
Yeah.
There should be like a share or option to share, and it should say share sound or share audio. Click the little arrow that's next to the share.
I did, and it didn't pop up.
You don't have options or more options.
No.
Well, perhaps that's okay. You just give them a quick recap of what it would be, and
Do you want to do that?
oh,
No, I
certainly.
have a slide that talks about air property.
Oh, you go right ahead. Thank you, Sam.
Okay. So let's talk about air property and tango titles. In Texas, when someone dies without a will, Texas law decides who gets their property. Usually heirs inherit the property in undivided shares, and these people are often called heir property owners. The ownership is not divided, but each heir gets a percentage of the property together. So if it's me and 3 of my siblings, and so there's 4 children, and my parents pass away, then each of me and my siblings will inherit 25% ownership of their property. So let's keep that in mind. So not one gets it, they don't divide it up, but everybody owns it collectively. A tango title is what happens when a home is passed down without a clear legal process. So think no will, we don't go to probate court to transfer ownership, things like that. So it gets kind of messy. It can also happen if there's a will, especially when the property is left to multiple heirs and no one is officially put on the deed. So what that means is that the person living in the home may not legally own it, and it makes it harder to apply for exemptions, pay taxes, prevent foreclosures, get assistance when we're going through disasters and whatnot. And then nobody wants to pay the tax bill. So it makes it harder to navigate all of those processes, but we're here to make it a little bit simpler for y'all. You can still apply for property tax exemptions for heir property. There is a new law in Texas that says heirs living in your home that they inherited had to do some kind of probate work. Oh, well, before our new law, they had to do some kind of probate work, like going to court and probating the estate, validating the will before they could get the homestead exemptions in their own name. And even if they got the exemption, it would only apply to their share of the property. So if I got the exemption for my parents' property, I would only get 25% of the exemption for the home. However, there's a new Texas law that says heirs can now qualify for property tax exemptions without having to go through probate court. And instead, they can give the appraisal district certain documents to show that they are an heir, like an affidavit or deed history. And the best part is that even if the heir only owns a fraction of the property, like I only own 25%, you can now get 100% of the exemption as long as you live in the home and meet certain requirements. So again, even if the home is not deeded in your name, but it's an heir property, you can provide the information that the appraisal district requires to gain 100% of that homestead exemption, which is very beneficial to a lot of our clients here. You will still use Form 50-114 for your heir tax exemptions. They have boxes here you can check that says this is an heir property. Again, you will need to select heir property, which you would check yes in that first yellow box. And then at the bottom, it asks, do other heir property owners occupy the property? Yes, which will require affidavits, or no. We did recently help one of our clients apply for an heir property, and he lived there with his sister and his brothers, and he applied for the exemption, and they were approved. And he got a nice little refund, which was good for them. And so, some of the documents required for an heir property tax exemption, again, is an application form 50-114. Then you need your affidavits, which I'll show you next. You need to have those signed and notarized. You also need to have the property owner's death certificate or a copy, and then a most recent utility bill for the property. And then sometimes they can require court papers or affidavits from other heirs who live at the property, if there are any. And so this is what a residence homestead exemption affidavit looks like. And there's different parts to it. This one happens to be an affidavit for owner applicant who is age 65 or older, but their ownership interest is not on record, so it's not filed with the court. The deed is not in their name. If you're over 65, this is what you would have notarized in front of a notary, and what you would also submit to your, appraisal district. This one is your affidavit for an applicant claiming an ownership interest of property, which includes the heir property. So if this was me and I was trying to get a homestead exemption on my parents' property, then this is what I would fill out to hopefully get my homestead exemption and lower the tax rates while I'm living in their home. So just a reminder, and I know I said it before, the air property exemptions is not a substitute for a transfer title. So it does not mean you own the home. It just means that you're living there and you want to take advantage of the exemptions, homestead exemptions, to make your taxes more affordable. You still will not have title. You still have to do title clearing work to get ownership on record or a marketable title. So remember, just because you're approved for these air property tax exemptions does not mean the home belongs to you. It just says, hey, I'm living here. This is my primary residence. I want to take advantage of these tax breaks. If my homestead application for it is denied or my deferral was denied, you can also protest that. You should get a letter with giving you 30 days to turn in any missing documents before they officially deny it. And if they officially deny it, then you have the right to protest that denial, and then you'll go again to an ARB. You don't automatically get an informal hearing if you're denied, but you can still try sending updated or missing paperwork to the appraisal district before your hearing. And also, if you need some more advice about that, you could come to Lone Star Legal Aid for assistance if you qualify. So some common reasons for your exemption denial will be that you didn't provide a current unexpired photo ID with the current property address listed. You didn't provide proof of disability for a disability exemption or tax deferral, or you didn't provide adequate proof of home ownership. If your exemption was denied because of an issue proving ownership, title clearing work may be needed. Again, Lone Star Legal Aid. However, sometimes alternative proof of ownership is accepted, but you would need to talk to your appraisal district and consider consulting a lawyer, or again, Lone Star Legal Aid. And then you have the right to appeal the district court or enter binding arbitration if you disagree with the ARB's decision. And again, this is a stage when you should consider talking to a lawyer to get more information and maybe even legal assistance to help you get your homestead exemptions approved. Ooh, what if I can't afford my taxes? Well, you might qualify for a payment plan. So some homeowners are allowed to break up their property tax bill into 4 equal payments with no penalties or interest, as long as they qualify and act by the deadline. Generally, this option is available to people who are 65 or older or disabled veterans, or their unmarried surviving spouses who also qualify for an exemption, or partially disabled veterans with a donated home and their surviving spouses. To use this option, you need to make your first payment and request the installment plan before February 1st. And then the plan usually covers all the taxing units on your bill, not just one part, but I would still make sure that I'm contacting our other taxing units to make sure they're on record, because usually the Central Appraisal District will send notices to the other taxing units, but it still may take a while before it shows up on their records. So always follow up with the other taxing entities to make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, so if you qualify for the 4 payment plan option, this is how it works. So you have to make your first payment by February 1st, and you also need to tell the tax office you're choosing the installment option. The second payment is due by April 1st, and then followed by the third on June 1st, and the fourth and final payment is due by August 1st. It's very important to let the tax office know that you're using this option, and you can make your first payment on time because if you don't make your first payment on time, then they can take away that payment plan, and then you're stuck owing more taxes, more interest and penalties. I do know that HCAD allows you to apply for a payment plan online, but you can also submit it via paperwork as well.
The tax office, you keep saying HCAD.
Oh, the tax office.
Mhm.
Yeah, the tax office, my bad. Sorry. Again, my first time.
That's okay.
In addition to the four payment plans, that some local tax offices may offer a 2-payment option. And with that plan, you pay the first half by December 1st, and then the second half by July 1st, with no penalties or interest. But not all counties do that. So you have to check with your local tax office to see if they offer that in your area. If your home is in a disaster area and was damaged, you may qualify for the 4 equal installments, even if you're not over 65 or disabled. But again, contact your tax office after a disaster to see if they offer any assistance in that nature. You may also be able to set up a payment plan of 12 to 36 months with the tax office or the taxing unit's attorneys. And some homeowners have more than one tax office, so you must contact every tax office that collects taxes for your home. I know there's the MUD districts, kind of like in the north area, A-Leaf, all of that good stuff. Each individual tax office you would have to contact. Don't forget, make sure you're all on the same page again. This is our tax office website. It's a little screen grab of the website to know what you're looking for. This is the website you go to, and then you go to the property tax tab, and then you go all the way down to the property tax installment plan. That's where you can apply online. What else? I guess, Lauren, is this you?
Would like for it to me.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. So just thank you, Sam, about all this information. If you have a mortgage company, keep in mind that you do have the right to take your advantage of your payment plan if it doesn't include taxes and fees, which for these specific quarterly plans, for payment plans is the case, then make sure that you let your mortgage company know. Otherwise, they're going to pay your taxes for you, count it as a default on your mortgage. You can tell them that in writing as well as over the phone.
Did you want to share your screen?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
Is there another slide on that?
No, but let me know when your next slide.
I think you still have a little bit on tax foreclosure unless you want me to move on in.
I'll know. Oh, tax deferrals, my favorite. So tax deferrals, and what are they? A tax deferral is an option that you can apply for, and it lets you delay paying your property taxes if you qualify. So this can help you prevent foreclosure and stay in your home. It's a very valuable tool to use if you qualify. You are still taxed every year, and you do still owe taxes, but you don't have to pay right away. And instead, your unpaid taxes build up interest at a low 5% rate. So it also lowers the interest rate, but you're not penalized by being eligible for foreclosure for unpaid taxes. This only applies for your residence homestead. You must either be age 65 or older or have a disability. And so how do you apply for your tax deferral? You'll have to fill out an affidavit, which is form 50-126, and I'll show you a screen grab of that, and then turn it into your county appraisal district. Or you can also find the form at comptroller.texas.gov. And this is what your tax deferral affidavit looks like. You have to put all of that good information on it. And so, again, the tax deferral does not get rid of any unpaid taxes or taxes that will become due. It just puts them on pause. But if you sell your home, then all of the taxes that you had deferred must be paid at closing. If you live in your home until you pass away, your heirs will then have to pay the taxes after you're gone. In Texas, deferred property taxes become due 181 days, so about 6 months after the homeowner passes away. And so how that works is that if the homeowner deferred their taxes and hasn't been making payments on them, and they still owe taxes at the time of their death, Don't forget they're charging you 5% interest per year. All the taxes that are deferred must be paid within 181 days to avoid foreclosure. If they aren't paid by that deadline, then the taxing authority can begin the foreclosure proceedings. So keep that in mind. And then something else important for heirs is that you can keep the tax deferral going if one of the heirs qualifies for the same deferral and are living in the home as their primary residence. Otherwise, the estate or the heirs will need to pay off the deferred amount in full. So you want to, I like to tell our clients that even if you have a deferral, pay something every month, $20 here, $20 there. It just keeps it lower for your heirs. And then also make sure you're telling your children or your heirs that, hey, I have a tax deferral. So when my time comes, don't be surprised when you get a huge tax bill. You want to save your home and create generational wealth with that. So we'll discuss more later about how tax deferrals can stop a foreclosure sale or the tax collection lawsuit. Generally, you're not allowed to apply for a tax deferral if you have a mortgage, because when you sign your mortgage contracts, you agree to stay current on your property taxes. So keep that in mind. So can I be foreclosed on for not paying my property taxes? Yes, yes, you can. We see it here a lot at Lone Star Legal Aid. I think this is where Lauren is taking over.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Sam, for all that wonderful information. So tax foreclosures generally in Texas. So tax foreclosure, rather generally in Texas, Texas is a non-judicial foreclosure state for other things. So for mortgages, for example, you generally can be foreclosed without a lawsuit. However, Texas is judicial for taxes. The taxing units must file a lawsuit and get a court order in order to foreclose. And Sam, if you don't mind going to the next slide, and then we'll switch when we get. Once the taxing unit has a court order, it must send the property owner or owners a notice of foreclosure sale letter at least 21 days before the scheduled sale. The taxing units or whomever is foreclosing in Texas doesn't have to prove anyone actually received the letter, just that they sent it. Foreclosures in Texas, be it mortgage or HOA or taxes, in this case, they're the first Tuesday of every month. If Tuesday falls on New Year's or 4th of July, the foreclosures do move to that immediately following Wednesday. And this is where I can go ahead and switch and share my screen if you're okay with that, Sam. Okay. And hopefully, okay, is that my screen showing now?
Yeah, but you have to do a slideshow and then start from this slide.
Okay.
No, you had your screen and
No,
then
you
I
you're
had it.
right. Yeah,
Oh,
it just
okay.
wasn't in presentation mode.
I see. Okay. Forgive me for my
Yeah,
This is what
there you go.
happens. This is what happens when we switch it up and have Samantha be the presenter.
no, no, thank you so much, Sam. So as we've said many times, so delinquent taxes can lead to foreclosure. Delinquent tax accounts under the law are allowed to be turned over for collections effective July 1st. So that is a key date. Once the tax arrears are referred to collections, which means an attorney's office, they're automatically going to be fees just for the attorney's office monitoring the account. They should be sending you letters, giving you the opportunity to make your payments, let you know that they're delinquent, and give you the opportunity to sign up for one of those payment plans. Just note, once you're working with the attorney's office, we've had some attorney's offices where you set it up direct through them, and some that will refer you back to the tax office. So just start with whomever's contact information is on the delinquency letter that you receive. Okay. So let's say that does not work out, informal efforts don't pan out, no payment plan is set up. Then it's time for the tax attorneys who represent the taxing units to file a lawsuit. They file something with the court called a petition or court papers stating they list on there who is the record owner, who they think owns the property, and that taxes are owed. And keep in mind that tax offices may represent multiple taxing units. So, for example, Harris County, the Emergency Services District, what have you, and that collectively those groups may retain one attorney, or in this case, they have that in-house now with their own county attorney's office. And then other taxing units may retain separate attorneys. So the ISD, the school district, may have retained a different attorney's office to pursue their tax collection. So you may get multiple attorneys involved, just so you know. The first taxing group, the first attorney group that will serve the petition, the first one that brings the suit on the property owners. They'll generally have a constable serve the owners, but they are allowed to do something called alternative service, which is to send it by mail. Maybe they'll leave it at the property. So be watching your mail and so forth to keep that in mind. They also have to tell the other taxing units. So they will look at the tax records and see that you're taxed by a variety of units and make sure that all those taxing units know of the lawsuit. And if those taxing units don't also work with that initial attorney office that brought the suit, then you'll see what are called interventions. So you'll see other taxing groups come in and file to say, hey, taxes are owed to us too, if that's the case. In regard to heir property that Sam talked about earlier, if the property owner has died, they're going to serve whomever they think is the owner. They'll do their best due diligence, but as part of that, they're also going to appoint or ask the court to appoint a neutral third party called an attorney ad litem. They will be appointed to essentially find if there's any unknown heirs. They'll do research, they'll interview the known heirs, they'll visit the house, and they'll submit a report to the court to make sure it's clear who the heirs are and that they are all served. If you're sued for delinquent property taxes, make sure to file an answer. An answer is where basically you're telling the court, hey, I exist. I want to participate in this lawsuit. I want notice of everything. If you don't do that, then after a certain amount of time, you have, once you're served, you have the Monday following 20 days after you're served. So when you're served, you count 20 days and then roll to the next Monday. If you haven't answered by that time, technically the attorney's offices can file for what's called a default judgment and basically say, hey, court, let me show you all my evidence. We think we're correct. And the defendant was properly served and still didn't appear. So make sure to file an answer. In Texas, you're allowed to file what's called a general denial, meaning, hey, I generally deny everything that they're claiming, and I want the petitioner, meaning the tax office, to prove that I actually owe what they're claiming. So you're allowed to do that. TexasLawHelp.org is a kind of clearinghouse that's vetted by nonprofits and the attorneys in the Supreme Court. It has all sorts of great resources, one of which is a sample answer. I have a picture here. So there is a fill in the blank form that you can use to make sure you get your answer on file. You can, contact Lone Star Legal Aid if you have questions about how to fill it out, and that gets filed with the district clerk's office or the court where you're answering. Keep in mind there will also be court costs added to the tax account, or that can be taxed to the tax account by virtue of filing the lawsuit. It costs money to bring the lawsuit. Texas does have the right for you to file something called a statement of inability to afford payment of court costs or an appeal bond. That's basically you state that you don't have the money to pay those particular costs, and go through some of an accounting of your income and expenses. And if you file them, they can't be charged against you personally, although if multiple people own the property or there are other defendants, that's another issue, but you can definitely get that on file. And here's just a picture of that sample that's also available at Texas Law Help. So some practical kind of nuts and bolts. So you've been served with this lawsuit, and unfortunately you haven't been able to pay or qualify for payment plan, what have you. Then you will be eventually scheduled for a trial. They may have it in person or they may have it by Zoom. You'll get a notice in the mail with information instructions. You should get something that says notice of trial. Read it carefully. It may instruct you to do specific things that are the rules under Texas law, or even more specific rules under the particular court. Like, for example, they want you to e-file or serve the other side with your evidence X number of days in advance. So make sure you read that notice carefully. It'll also tell you what the instructions are to sign on. You should have received copies in the mail of all the papers that were filed in the lawsuit, but if you're in Harris County or most counties in Texas, they're often also available on the district clerk's website. So make sure you've looked at all the papers that have been filed in the lawsuit. And throughout this time, the attorneys may still be reaching out to you, and you can proactively reach out to them to try to negotiate a payment plan and see if you can get back in good standing. Some additional practical tips. It's a deal to arrive early in the courtroom or even log on to the Zoom to make sure you have everything working. There's no tech issues like I just had trying to share a screen. There's often multiple cases at the same court docket. So you may appear and there's a room full of people, or you may show up on Zoom and there's a ton of little boxes of faces because there's multiple attorneys and multiple other defendants in the case, in that court setting. When your case is called, the judge may informally talk for a minute, ask you if you were aware of what's going on, confirm who you are, but ultimately you'll go on the record where things are being, recorded and for the court. It's the tax attorney's office burden to prove their case. So they'll go first and they'll discuss their evidence. They will have filed evidence showing how much is owed on the account, and then you get the chance to show your evidence if you have proof that, say, you did make a payment, maybe it slipped through the cracks or something. If the tax attorney proves its case, the judge will sign an order allowing them to move forward with the foreclosure, and the judge will also say in that order how much is owed, how much is allowed to be collected at the foreclosure sale. Additional key tips. Don't ignore any court papers or letters from attorneys. Even if they're not addressed for you. I had someone who said, well, it was addressed to my mom, so I didn't worry about it. Well, mom passed away, and you're the one in the house. So make sure that you're, reviewing any court papers or any letters from attorneys. Again, file that answer, file a statement of inability if appropriate, try to negotiate payment plans. Remember, there may be multiple attorneys representing different tax units. I know we're saying this over and over, but we will have people who say, oh, I set up a payment plan. Why am I still being sued? Well, they set it up with Harris County's tax office, but not with the school district's tax office. You do have the right to ask the judge for, if you're in a trial, to ask for more time. The judge doesn't have to grant that, but if you feel you have a good reason, like, hey, I want to pay the money, I now have a new job, I'm going to, you can tell the judge that and ask if they'll give you a little time and reset the trial. Harris County does have a unique setup which is allowed under the law, and some courts use it and some don't, but something called Tax Masters Court. So these tax lawsuits are technically in the district court. There's a district court judge who hears a variety of different types of cases, and they have the right to get an ancillary associate judge that they call a tax master. And so you will be in Harris County, and most times you'll be in front of what's called that tax master, and they will hear the evidence and they'll write in a recommendation to the district court. If you disagree with the tax master, you have 10 days to appeal that and have the case reheard by the district court directly. So just want to make sure you keep that in mind. While you're in the middle of the tax lawsuit, the rights to have a deferral and so forth apply, just like they did at any other time. So if you are age 65 or older or disabled, either you're getting Social Security disability or you have a physician who can sign a physician statement attesting to your disability, then you have the right to abate the lawsuit, which means put it on hold. So you should immediately tell the tax attorneys if, hey, I'm 70 years old, I qualify for a deferral. Then you have to actually fill out the forms. So you have to fill out the homestead exemption application if you haven't already and submit it, and fill out the tax deferral affidavit. It has to be notarized. You can apply with us if you want some help with that. And you have to send it to the appraisal district so it's actually processed, and you file it with the court. And then once you have taken care of that, the court should agree to abate or put the lawsuit on hold. So it still floats there, but they're not actively pursuing it. Let's see. If it's actually set for sale. So here's how to use a deferral. If you've unfortunately made it all the way through the lawsuit process and the court has signed a judgment allowing the foreclosure to go through, and now you've turned 65 or what have you, and you realize you can do an affidavit, you can still take advantage of your tax deferral. There is a process for that. You complete the tax deferral, you give it to the taxing unit's attorneys, you give it to the constable who's going to sell the property, and you give it to the appraisal district. And technically, you're supposed to do it at least 5 days before the sale. I would say at least do it as soon as, even if it's fewer than 5 days, but technically that's the case. You need to provide supporting evidence, and this is true in this lawsuit as well. You would just need to show that either you're over 65 or you're disabled and be prepared to provide that proof. At that point, the tax sale, the scheduled sale, should be canceled. It's called abated, but in practical sense, it's canceled for that particular scheduled sale date. And then again, you have to send the appraisal district your tax deferral affidavit and have it processed and granted. So once that occurs, or if that does not occur, if they determine you don't qualify, again, you get to appeal, like the process, you can protest the process that Sam talked about. But ultimately, if you don't get that deferral in place, they will reschedule the sale. But again, that tax deferral is a very powerful tool to put a tax sale or a tax lawsuit on hold. Finally, what happens if now you're even further down the line and unfortunately the property has actually sold? Unlike mortgages, for example, you have in Texas a right to redeem property. That means to get it back after a tax foreclosure if you follow the proper requirements. If it's a homestead, you have up to 2 years after the sale date. It's just that it's expensive. So you have to pay, in order to redeem after the first year, you have to pay all the past due taxes and fees plus a 25% premium over that. So if you can afford to pay everything that was sold at the foreclosure sale plus an additional 25%, then in that first year you can redeem the property or get title back. In the second year, it's a 50% premium. So you have to be able to pay 150% of what was paid at the tax sale in order to get your property back. Once that 2 years has passed, then your redemption time has ended. If you have the money to pay, then start, as a practical matter, I'd contact the tax office. Ultimately, the money goes to the buyer, but you can, if you can't locate the buyer, what have you, there's maybe a way to pay the tax office and get documentation that you were trying to redeem. Definitely, if you're redeeming a property, is a good time to contact legal aid or to contact your own lawyer to make sure that process of getting title back is done accurately. Also, let's say you unfortunately can't afford to redeem the property, but the property sold for more than was owed. The owner, the former owner of the property, does have the right to get those what's called excess proceeds. So let's say $10,000 was owed on the home at the time of the foreclosure sale, and there was a bit of a bidding war, and it sold for $30,000. That extra 20 technically goes back to the property's former owners who owned it before the sale. You can file what's called a petition to ask for those excess proceeds. Once the sale is settled, those proceeds go back in the registry or the bank account of the court where that originally ordered the foreclosure. And then the former homeowner can apply for it. Now, the taxing units can also apply if additional taxes accrued between the date of the judgment and the sale. So let's say the court ordered the foreclosure in December. Well, the next year's tax bill wasn't out yet, or maybe November or October, and the next year's unit wasn't out yet. Property doesn't sell till the next year. The court can come back and say, that next year's taxes was owed and it wasn't in the judgment. But then everything left, the property owner can apply for. The property owner has 2 years to do that. And you only get your apportioned amount. So let's say you're an heir property owner and you owned it 50% with your sibling, then you would qualify for 50% of those excess proceeds. And in Harris County, the tax master do have a sample online. Again, if you're trying to get excess proceeds, you can apply with Lone Star Legal Aid or get another attorney, but it is a court procedure you can do on your own. There are sample documents if you are interested. Also check with the court. They may have specific policies. And then finally, just wanted to touch on scams. So when a foreclosure sale is scheduled, be it for mortgages, taxes, HOA, that notice of sale that you get 21 days in advance is on public record. It's filed with the county clerk. And so people will start to contact the homeowners trying to buy the home or what have you. So also if you have a lawsuit like for HOA or for taxes, that's public record. So people will see that you're at risk of losing the home. And so people will start contacting you. Don't feel pressured to have to, follow what they're offering. The Federal Trade Commission and Texas Law Help have great articles about avoiding scams. And so our contact information, again, 713-652-0077 or lonestarlegal.org. And thank you for your attention today. So I'll stop sharing and then we can move forward.
All right. We also had Shay Pinkowski with the Harris County Tax Office that was on. Shay, did you want to add any additional information that to kind of elaborate on anything that Samantha presented earlier?
So there's quite a bit of information that was provided, so I'll try and think off the top of my head, but if anyone has questions, please feel free to pipe in. Let's see. They did do a really good job of covering a lot of what we do and kind of making it all more linear to understand what the process is when going through just taxes in general through the beginning of January all the way to when you have your properties valued, and then the protesting portion, and then, of course, determining what exemptions are applicable to your property, and all of that process being done by the appraisal district. I maybe just want to add a little bit about specifically for Harris County, because a lot of us are located here in Harris County, or at least get a bill from Harris County or City of Houston. All of the information that the appraisal district provides to us from Harris Central Appraisal District gets provided to us through something called an electronic tax roll. So whenever you go and apply for these exemptions, or you apply for your deferral, or you go through the process of protesting your property values, all of that information that is collected by the appraisal district is then submitted into our office via an electronic system where we upload all of that information to correctly calculate for your tax bills with that new changed of information. This also includes for like address changes. So if your mailing address is different than the property address and it's not saying so as such on your tax bill, you would change that through the appraisal district. In order for any of that information to be changed, they would have to get that first, and then it would be sent to us. And while, yes, it is good to check on your bill to make sure that it is reflecting the correct information, there's not really anything that the Harris County Tax Office can do to expedite that change of information on your account. So if you're waiting for, say, a deferral to be applied onto your account because you applied for it, it was accepted by the appraisal district, and now you're waiting for it to show on the account, that's one thing you can let us know, and we can notify the attorneys if it's already at that point. But if it's before any kind of litigation goes onto the account and, you're not having any trouble with your taxes, they're all paid in full, but you want to see that deferral on there, we don't really have a way of expediting that process. It does have to go through the proper channels, and it does have to go through the electronic tax roll to make sure that all the information is correct. So a lot of times we'll get, emails, phone calls from folks asking for us to, oh, I need my address changed like today, or, oh, I need my deferral to show on there now, or my over 65 exemption, or my bank is needing how much it's going to be for my escrow to reflect properly. We get a lot of those calls and requests for information, but unfortunately, as far as our office is concerned, we don't have the ability to change anything on the tax roll, for the simple fact that the reason that the appraisal district exists in the first place is to make sure that the person who is collecting your money is not the person who's telling you how much you need to pay, because that leads to folks believing that, oh, well, you're just increasing my my tax value so that you can, collect more money from me, and that's not the case, right? And that's not the case. So because we have those kind of checks and balances in place, we don't have the ability to change any of that information. So yes, it does take a little bit longer, but it's there for a good reason. So yeah, unfortunately, now if you are getting a deferral and you're in the process of getting that deferral or that homestead exemption and you're already behind on your taxes, like, in those situations, you can reach us for the deferral to let us know that you are in the process of applying for that deferral. If you're already in that judgment part of the process, you can let us know that your account is going to be on a deferral, and we can contact the attorneys to request that they put it on hold until that gets processed through. We'll put it on like a 30-day hold, and once we can get an idea of when that change is going to go through into the system, so that we can reanalyze and see from that point, because it's a hold because we're not able to take it as a deferral until the appraisal district provides that to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it would give you that little bit of time in between while you're waiting for the appraisal district to approve and submit and send all of that information over to us. Then you would still be a little bit more at ease knowing that the attorneys aren't actively trying to pursue it while all of this is going on. So that's something you can request. It is something you have to reach out to our office for, but that is part of the process. But as far as having it actually count as, you cannot pursue this property for litigation, that can't happen until that deferral is on, or that correction goes through into the system to reflect as such. Let's see, something else. There are some payment agreements that what they mentioned earlier as well, that you have the ability to enter into a payment agreement with us. We do offer this for homestead and non-homesteaded properties. For homesteads, we allow for extended payment agreements, so you can do it for 12, 24, 36 months. For non-homestead properties, we're able to offer it up to a year. And during COVID rules, we had it to where we were able to continuously add on tax years, regardless of the status of the previous tax agreement for your payment plans. We're no longer going to be able to do that next upcoming year. So this upcoming year, if you have a payment agreement in place for 24 taxes and prior, you won't be able to add 25 taxes to that payment agreement. So if you're already in a payment agreement for 24 and back, and you're anticipating to be able to continue to do that, to add 2025 to those taxes, or to add 25 to the payment agreement, it's not going to be possible. Until that first agreement is paid off, we will not be able to start a new payment agreement. So just keep that in mind whenever you're going through the process of creating your payment agreements for this year, that in addition to having to pay for the taxes for previous years in that agreement, you'll also want to be saving up in order to be able to pay your taxes timely here at the end of this upcoming January. So just to kind of keep that in mind, and recognize that it is a good tool to use whenever you're going through the process of paying off delinquent taxes. you need to make sure that you are aware that it is a tool. It's not always going to be able to continuously revolve and include the next year's taxes, because at that point, no one would ever pay their taxes timely if they could continue to do so.
Just keep adding and keep adding. It's going to add
Just
up
keep
and be a
adding and
bigger
adding,
bill.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
it just continues to become a bigger and more difficult bill to swallow. And we are here to help. So if you have questions, you're more than welcome to give us a call or send us an email. But as far as payment agreements go, that's something that I wanted to share. Let's see. Can you think of anything, Nia, that you
Yeah,
might want some
there was
clarification on?
actually a question that was on YouTube for you. It says this is for the tax office. Are there any potential changes from the Texas legislature in how property taxes will be handled? Will exemptions change, and will the date or the deadline for property tax or to pay property taxes change? Are you aware
So
of
the
any?
date, I'm not aware of any changes to change the date and when property taxes are due. From my understanding, they will continue to be collected by the end of January. There are some in the works for increasing the homestead exemption again, from what I understood, for the school. But that's undecided. They still need to put that to a vote, and it still needs to go through the due process. Aside from that, nothing is coming to mind for property taxes, but I do know that they are, in the process of, going through and possibly increasing that exemption for homestead properties and for property taxes. But aside from that, nothing is coming to mind as far as changing dates or anything like that. From our understanding, property taxes will continue to be due at the end of January, unless, of course, something comes up. But at this moment, I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, I had a question for you, Lauren. The last few slides before you had gone over, it was about being able to, you having that period of time to be able to actually get your property back after it's been sold. I'm assuming that the property tax sales only apply for those folks that don't have a mortgage on their house. Is that correct? Because otherwise, generally, the mortgage company pays the taxes in advance, and then they go through the process of making sure that they collect that money back, because they don't want to be take second to
Right.
property taxes.
So,
So
Right.
yeah.
So I had a thought, and then of course, Shay, I'd love to hear from you too. So no, so with mortgages, really the only time I've ever seen mortgages not require taxes is when it's some kind of contract for deed or something that private parties did and they didn't account for the taxes. So you're correct. Generally speaking, when there's a mortgage, the mortgage will have paid the taxes. You're not facing tax foreclosure. It's now a delinquency on the mortgage, and you owe the mortgage company reimbursement for those taxes. So it's the tax law applies to anyone who is foreclosed for taxes for whatever reason it was. And you're correct, it's very rare when it was a mortgage on the property and they still foreclosed.
because I've
Yeah.
seen where some people, like if it's like a conventional loan, after I know for the life of an FHA loan that they are required to escrow. But after a conventional loan, people can refinance, or if they get a conventional loan, once they've got so much equity kind of built up in it, they're not necessarily required to escrow at that point. So then at what point would a mortgage company step in versus when,
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
if they're not required to escrow, who gets the lead
Yeah.
then at that point, or how does that work?
So it's, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna agree, because yes, it's very rare for a mortgage company to be on the property as an invested owner or an investment into the property, and them not be escrowing taxes. It does happen because, like you said, during conventional loans, they have the opportunity to do that after a couple of years. But those taxes that are due kind of supersede the mortgage company. So if they are not paying their taxes and those taxes are still owed, we are still able to take them to tax sale and go through that process of getting that foreclosure taken care of and, applied and gone through the tax sale. And that's kind of where that whole the recuperation of the property happens, is after the taxes have already been paid off through the tax sale. And it does become kind of a part of that process whenever they're having those the mortgage company go through that process. But at that point, you'd be owing the bank money aside from owing the taxes on the property. So you would end up owing both. Now, what happens a lot is I see, you know, if they do have to go in and they catch it and they say, hey, you know, pay these taxes towards this property, this is how much is delinquent, then at that point, I believe they can force you, depending on the contract, to go into an escrow with them.
Yes.
And then you'd be owing for the taxes on that escrow plus the escrow for the next year, because then you'll be paying for back taxes and for taxes for the next year
Yep.
upcoming.
And the mortgage
And,
payment.
you know, and the mortgage payment. So it all
Yeah.
can kind of pile up together and become quite an issue. So it is something that you want to kind of be mindful of. And that's part of the reason why, even when you're deferred, or if you're trying to become deferred on your property taxes, you have to check in with your bank, because not all banks will allow you to defer your taxes, because in the eyes of, you know, the law and the banks, those taxes are still due, even though they're deferred and you have this, you know, unlimited time to pay until you're no longer the owner of that property or you pass away. Those taxes are still due. And in the bank size, if those taxes are due, they can be put into tax sale. And if that property can be put into tax sale, they could lose whatever interest they have in that property. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's where that kind of problem comes in from, you know, folks who have a mortgage on their property, or they're making their payments to a bank for their property, and they would like to be deferred in order to avoid, you know, that potential of losing their home, but then not being able to do so. So it is just one of those things where you have to be really conscious of what your process is when it comes to paying those taxes.
Yeah. It's
So-
generally a term of the deed of trust that you have to pay them too. So
Yeah. Another question in regards to this particular situation. So if I buy a tax foreclosed property and say Shay decides, you know, she's within her 2-year time limit, she wants to you know, she won the lottery, she wants to get her property back. I've already bought the house, I've moved in, I have now my kids are in school or whatever. Am I then supposed to just kind of give up the house if she decides that she wants to pay that the back taxes plus the 25% or however much it is within, you said 25% within 2 years? Is it
25% in the first year.
25% of the
And
first year,
then-
then 50% the second year. So if she
And
pays
then
all
after
of that
that-
back and she decides she wants to get her house back, am I required to move? I have to then give it back?
Yeah,
Yep.
that property was sold to you, but has been repaid to you in the amount that you paid into it. And any additions, any fixing, any, you know, arrangements to get the property into a better state than when you purchased it, that goes to
Just
the new
goes to the
homeowner, or to the previous homeowner, essentially.
Right.
And it is one of those things that you want to be real cautious of whenever you're purchasing these properties through that tax sale. But yeah, essentially any changes that you made remain to the property, and you are required to return that property to them if they are going back and paying that 150 or 125% of the value of that you purchased it at.
And I actually want to kind of touch on this too, because we were talking about this just before about how some people think this that you know, paying off somebody's delinquent taxes, not necessarily going through the foreclosure process. Does that make them owner because they're paying the back taxes on somebody's property?
Nope,
They
it
don't
does
sell
not.
tax lien.
Anyone can pay anyone's taxes, and it's called a voluntary payment. So you're able to pay taxes to whatever property you would like to pay property taxes to, and we're not going to stop you from paying a bill, but it's not going to give you any kind of ownership on the property just because you paid the taxes. And you can show and shout that you paid the taxes for this property for 10, 15, 20 years. And while that means that the actual owners of the property are owing quite a lot of taxes, because if they're letting you pay for 10, 15, or 20 years, you know, they're going to be owing quite a bit of back taxes, you know, should those taxes, you know, be removed. But yeah, it does not provide any kind of stake in ownership by paying someone else's taxes. Or
I had a very, oh, Lauren, I'm sorry. Did you want to chime in or say anything else about that?
no, I totally agree with all that.
And this will be our last question, because I had a very interesting conversation with a lady that had called earlier this week, and her now deceased husband was married previously, and somehow or another during his separation or divorce from the first wife, his first wife is still has ownership interest in the house that she's currently living in. However, she's been paying the taxes for the years that he has been deceased. But of course, she has the life estate. She gets to stay there, but they don't want to give her the house. Does she truly wholeheartedly believe that she has ownership interest in the house because it was her husband's property and she's been paying the taxes on it since he's deceased? And he has children with the previous wife, so on and so forth, but didn't
So
leave her the house.
previous wife wants ownership or current wife wants ownership of
Current
the
wife
property?
wants ownership. The previous wife is still on ownership of the house with the
So
with the with
whenever
the
you
now
go
Yes.
through from my understanding, when you go through a divorce, that property would have been part of the proceedings. There should be some kind of documentation showing, okay, either it's going to be split between the two, or it goes to him, or it goes to her. And then from that point on, that needs to be determined first before any consequent proceedings. So it might be the case where, like, ex-wife owns a portion of the property and new wife, as the heir to the husband or as the wife as common law property,
No,
might
no,
own a portion
the
of it.
children got it. No, the children got it. It's the children and then the wife. So there was no ownership claim. But for her,
Yeah.
because she's been living there for
Oh,
years and she's been paying the taxes on it and she lives there, she's been maintaining it, she assumed
that is her
that
property.
is now her property. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
The taxes aren't part of it. It sounds like the like Shay said, first you'd have to get the decree, make sure they didn't leave the property out, because occasionally that happens, but for the most part, it should be handled. Determine who
Usually.
acquired title. If the former wife still had title, then she has that right. Um, Depends on the intestate succession, like Nia said, it based on what we're hearing here. It may be the children who inherited title, but she has a life estate in his portion, may or may not be the other portion. So this sounds very, very fact specific, but
It is.
at best, and I have a anecdote maybe that explains it, or a thought that there would be maybe an offset for the half of the taxes, that the wife paid, and she would get reimbursed for that. But I did have a property owner an heir property owner, someone else was paying the taxes for, I want to say it was like 20 years. And she was adamant that she owned the property. And I was like, well, my client owns a portion too. He just has to reimburse you for, the half of his that you paid. And finally, the title company also went with that. And so that was what was happened. It was just offset by paying that person back what they were owed because they had paid the
Mhm.
taxes.
I wanted
Because
to
they had
bring
paid the
that up.
taxes unnecessarily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was their gift to do
Yeah.
it, and so they got their money back. But that was it.
I wanted to bring that up because we get a lot of those folks, and I know that there's a lot of information out there floating around on social media, TikTok about, show up at the hotel, and get a free lunch, and then we can tell you how you can buy all these tax lien properties and whatever in Houston, and that's not the case here. So before you guys go buying into these investment scams that they're telling you that you can buy all these properties once you pay their taxes, that's not the case. Please do your homework, and know what you're getting into, and consult with an attorney if you guys have gone through any kind of issues and things like that. I did give her Lone Star Legal Aid, by the way, because she just didn't want to hear what I had to say. I said, I'm not an attorney. I said,
It's
however,
okay.
I'm going to make sure that you contact them, because I'm like, lady, I'm not going to argue with you about that. But she
It's
was
fine.
adamant. And I'm like, okay, okay,
Okay.
go
And then
ahead.
we
Yeah.
may or may not tell her what she likes to hear, and she may, but we'll be happy to
Attorney. But
Um,
take your
definitely
application.
homework.
I wanted to bring up
She may
one
not
thing.
hear an answer that makes her happy, but
I
Go
wanted
ahead,
to bring
Sam.
up contract for deeds because it just crossed my head whenever you mention it. If you're in a contract for deed or an executory contract mortgage where, for sale by owner, and you're not in charge of paying your taxes, make sure you're checking your property taxes every year to ensure that they're being paid by the seller, because we get several cases where, hey, I just got served because the person who was selling me my house didn't pay taxes. And I didn't know that they weren't paying taxes for these 2 years. And now I've been paying my mortgage every month and they're coming to take my house. So
Mhm.
make
And get
sure,
your exemption.
yeah, your exemptions,
File
if you
your,
have a recorded deed, make sure that you put the taxes in your name and they're coming to you. It's public information, so you don't need to create an account or, pay to view your tax statements. Just make sure you're staying on top of that too, because we can't trust everybody. And we
And
have to do it
indeed,
for
indeed,
ourselves.
indeed.
yep,
Let's see, next month we are, I think it's June 26th, the fourth Thursday of next month. Is the foreclosure, the mortgage foreclosure, HELOCs, a home equity loan, and then I believe you guys go into a little more detail about contract for deeds and executory contracts. So if you guys are looking for more information about that, uh, or if you are in a situation of that regards and you need that information, you definitely want to tune in next month for that. Just an FYI too for everybody that our foreclosure prevention series is the fourth Thursday of each month. And then it's been broken up over the year for each quarter. There's a rotating schedule. This month is the property tax foreclosure. Next month is the actual mortgage foreclosure, home equity line of credit, um, um, reverse mortgage foreclosure, and then the following is the homeowner or HOA foreclosure. So it's broken up into a series, and just know that it's the fourth Thursday of each month if you want information about foreclosures and foreclosure prevention. So tune in for that. But with that being said, we are definitely over our time here for everybody. Thank you guys very much. Sam, great job. You did good. You can breathe now.
yeah.
You can breathe. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. If you're joining us on Zoom or if you're watching us on YouTube, we want to thank you guys for your continued support of the A Month of Service collaboration. To all of our partners, thank you for the tax office and Lone Star Legal Aid for you guys being here today and providing this information to the community. If you guys could take just a couple of minutes, there's a little brief survey that pops up at the end. If you guys could just take a couple of minutes to fill that out and let us know if you got the information that you intended to when you signed up to participate in this workshop. If there are any workshops that we don't currently offer that you guys may be interested in, then please provide us with your feedback so that we can plan moving forward. We have quite a few different workshops that are scheduled for the month of June, in addition to our foreclosure, our wills and estate planning, our clearing title. We do also have a scheduled, I believe it's June the 10th. We are going to have a title fraud and deed scams presentation that's coming up. That's been happening quite a bit around in this area where people's houses are being taken due to title fraud. So that's going to be at 1 p.m. on June the 10th. That's going to be a Zoom meeting, but I'm also going to be hosting that in person at the Alice Young Neighborhood Library that's over on Griggs Road. I will be there in person for those folks that don't have access to a computer. So if you guys want to come by, if you're in the neighborhood or what have you, then you'll be able to actually view the presentation there. So definitely tell a neighbor, because there are a lot of seniors that have been impacted by this, quite a few. So if you know of seniors that live in that neighborhood and they need to try to protect their homes as best as possible, that will be a great presentation for you guys to join in on. Also, June the 14th, we will be having a transfer on death deed clinic where we've got local volunteer attorneys that we will be paying to present and review Todd documents with you guys. Also have someone to notarize and to file them for you on site. So look for that information to actually come out to you guys as well within the next couple of days. Because you have registered, you will be put on our email list so that you'll be receiving that information. But the first Thursday of each month, we go, Lone Star Legal Aid has an attorney that presents information about wills and estate plans and documents that actually make up an estate plan. She goes into the detail about a transfer on death deed, why you need one, the importance of having it, the importance of having a will, and actually other estate plan documents in place. That meeting will also be a hybrid. That will be in person as well. Partially at Shape Community Center. I'm waiting for the exact address for that, but look for that information to come. June is going to be a very busy month for us. So we do have a few more things that are going on, and we are slowly trying to transition back into some of our in-person presentations to re-engage those community members that don't have access to computers or, phones, or know how to work Zoom and things of that nature. And Samantha is also going to be joining us at our home improvement presentation and resource fair. Yes, Sam, you are. I was voluntold that you will
Yeah,
be
yeah, 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 yeah. I was also volunteered. Forget. I think that's what, June 28th?
Saturday, June 28th. That's going to be at the Houston Texans YMCA. Look for that information to come out. That's done in partnership with Frost Bank to talk about home improvements, how to make sure that you have clear title to even apply for a home improvement loan, what that actually looks like, making sure that you have a will or an estate plan, going through the home inspection process, some do-it-yourself tips from the tool bank who's going to be there doing some demos. So that's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of great things going on there. So again, a lot of stuff going on for the month of June, and would love for you guys to participate. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. A copy of this recording will go out to everyone along with any resources that were mentioned, along with the links to the presenters' companies and organizations, so that you could also apply for services for Lone Star Legal Aid if you do find yourselves in need of any civil legal assistance. And I know I'm kind of speeding through this because we're already over the time limit, but again, it's recorded. It's also on YouTube, and it's also on the Amos Houston Facebook page, so that you guys will be able to go back and then actually watch any of the information that was presented here for you today. With that being said, thank y'all very much. Appreciate y'all, and you all have a wonderful remainder of your day. Stay cool out there. Get prepared for hurricane season. Check on your relatives, your neighbors, your loved ones, or what have you, to make sure that they're staying cool. I believe that they're starting to open up cooling centers and things kind of here and there throughout the city. So if you need to go somewhere cool, space is available to you as well. So y'all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. You take care of yourselves, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank
Sounds
you
wonderful.
so much.
Bye.
Have a great
Have a
day.
great day.